Hi everyone, Dave here. Thank you for coming along to another episode of Legends of the Spy. Great to have you with us. This is this podcast that speaks to the former players, managers, the fans, anyone really associated with Chesterfield Football Club, and unashamedly so. Now, on the podcast, we have had a few players last few weeks and had a week off last week because I was very busy with work. But I have got loads and loads of former Chesterfield players lined up. Quite a lot of those are with current football clubs. So obviously with it being the business end of the season, they want to fully concentrate on that, but they are willing to come on as soon as they get the chance to. And then there's a load of others that I'm talking to, just finalising dates with at the moment. So do keep an eye out as there's some really interesting names on that list. But for this week, I spoke to Luke Feather. Now, I thought with it being the time of year that it is, a lot of people are starting to think about university courses over the next 6 months. So I thought it would be good to speak to someone who is both a Chesterfield fan and also working in the media. So Luke is a third year sports media journalism student and currently working with Marine, who I'll have a Chesterfield link in Glyndhurst, former podcast guest. And it's really interesting having a chat with him about interviewing managers, writing match reports, commentary, things like that, and all of his studies. We also had a good chat about Chesterfield as well, obviously, and his era of when he became a Chesterfield fan, and most notably that John Sheridan, Paul Cook title-winning seasons. As always, we are at Spy Legends on Twitter and Instagram and Legends of the Spy on Facebook. So if you do walk past a former Chesterfield player while walking a dog, then do let them know that I am after them and wanting to speak to them. But here we are with the latest episode with Luke Feather.
Have you ever approached anyone that's still playing, still playing for Chesterfield, or do you just stick to like former players?
Yeah, I kind of, it's weird. I made like an unwritten rule when I started that I'd like try and do former players, so that in theory their history was with the club was like finished.
Yeah.
Then obviously Paul Cook kind of changed things. I spoke to him like 2 weeks before he came back.
You have to do a part two.
Because then you kind of think, well, already now that podcast is out of date.
Yeah.
Martin Allen came back with the most Martin Allen response, where it was just like a few lines where it said, "Hi Dave, I'd love to, but I can't. Not right now." Martin. And it's like, I think he put something like, "One day I will tell my story," or something at the end of it. And you just think,
very dramatic.
It's a bit cryptic. So maybe one day Martin Allen, but it's weird. I whizzed all the way through to like 50 and I was like, this is fine. Like, but now I'm at 50. It's like, it's getting harder and harder. And
yeah.
Think, can I get to 100? Might be able to, but I don't know. Yeah. We'll see. So then it'll just have to turn into something else, I suppose.
Yeah.
But anyway, on to the main topic of conversation. So I thought it'd be good just to have a chat about, because you're again studying sports journalism, aren't you? So what year are you in at the moment?
I'm in my final year, third year.
Okay. And you're working with Marine, aren't you, at the moment? Is that right?
Yeah, I've started there, I think it was June or July last year. The head of my course sent an email around and just said, Marine FC are looking for a new sort of media officer. They've always had a bit of connection, my uni and Marine, sort of third year students. They always try, they always ask them first. And so on the email, it just said, you've been shortlisted. If you're interested, then let me know and we'll sort an interview out. So I did the interview, and then a couple of days later, got a call, and it's me and George, another guy in my course. We sort of split it between us.
So what do you have to do, like as an application do you have to show them any work or anything like that?
It was more, for Marine, it was more just, because they have got that connection with my uni, they just sort of trust when they shortlist people. So I didn't have to do an application as such as I had an interview. It was about 10-15 minutes, just over Zoom, where I think the sort of foundations of it were, what can you sort of, what do you see as your strengths in terms of journalism or sports media? And at the time, they were very big on trying to push season ticket sales as well, because there's a lot of new people watching Marine because of the FA Cup run against, play Tottenham. So they were very big on trying to push season tickets. So they were saying, "Oh, what sort of promotional deals could you think of to try and boost season tickets? What sort of match day experience things do you think you can add to Marine?" So I basically just pitched him a few ideas, and it was quite relaxed, to be fair. I think it was more just sort of, seeing if I'd be a good fit and how dedicated I would be. Not dedicated, what's the word? Sort of enthusiastic.
Yeah,
I was towards it, and I just sort of said to him, "Look, I'd love to do it. It's something that I've always wanted to do, to work for a football club." And luckily, a couple of days later, they got back to me and offered it to me.
it's kind of a big time as well, isn't it, for non-league clubs? Because obviously during that lockdown period, everyone kind of rediscovered the love for like live football, didn't they? And with things like VAR and stuff like that, some people have turned away from kind of higher Premier League football, haven't they? And have gone to something a bit more grassroots. It feels like it's got a bit of a renaissance at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with Marine, like with where it is. Obviously, there's the two big clubs in the area, Liverpool and Everton. So, Premier League, VAR, everything that comes with that. I think they see it as a bit of a sort of, let's get away from the controversy of VAR. I think Everton fans more than Liverpool fans are happy to get away from Everton at the minute, to be honest. But you do see it though when obviously every Marine game's at 3:00 on a Saturday. If Liverpool are playing on a Sunday and Everton are the early kick-off on a Saturday, Marine attendances are easily over 1,000 every week. So, like you say, it is a big time for non-league. Obviously, my experiences with Marine, but I've not known it to be any different at Marine. But apparently, before this season, it's always been 300 or 400 every week. I think the lowest home attendance this year has been about 750, and that was on a Tuesday night. So it says a lot about how people are sort of flocking to Marine at the minute.
And you've got Glyn Hurst at Marine.
Yes.
You have got a Chesterfield connection at Glyn Hurst. He's the under 23s.
Yeah, I think he's reserve team manager. I've never spoke to him, to be fair, but he's I think it was one of the first things that my dad said to me when I told him about Marine things. "Oh, ex Chesterfield there."
Yeah. Oh, Glyn Hursty. So what do you end up doing then as part of? I've kind of had a little bit of a dig and at what you're doing, and you kind of do a bit of everything, don't you? You're like interviewing manager, and you're doing loads of other bits. You kind of get quite a full experience of it all, don't you?
Yeah. So on a match day, for the home matches, I'll interview the manager after the game, and we've tried to do a bit of a halftime challenge thing as well. We've called it the Kenji Crossbar Challenge, from where excuse me, Neil Kenji hit the crossbar from about 30 yards against Tottenham in the cup. So we've started the Kenji Crossbar Challenge, which is like a halftime sort of entertainment thing. Yet to see anyone hit the crossbar, but so then after that, I'll do the post-match interview, write the match report, and then I write a shorter match report as well from a non-league paper for the home games. And then for the away games, I commentate on games. So we live stream on YouTube, and just commentate. We only tend to do it for the away games, because for the people that are would listen, they're usually at the home games. So yeah, that's basically what I do. I've done a bit of social media for them as well when George hasn't been there. So a bit of Twitter commentary and sort of running the Instagram and stuff.
Forward by Jay Devine. Neil Kengi now. Kengi's shot. Oh, it's hit the bar! And Joe Hart tips the rebound over. What a drive from Kengi. I think Joe Hart misjudged this. Great strike. Joe Hart pulled out and it hit the bar. Real let off for Tottenham here. So close for Marine.
And with commentary, obviously everyone probably thinks that they'd be quite good at commentary. It's kind of one of those things where the commentators probably can't win. But how have you found it kind of getting into that?
At first, to be honest, terrifying. It was I don't know, it's such a weird thing. And I found, especially in my first week or two, because it was so new, I'd never done anything like that before. So I found myself recycling cliches that I've heard Martin Tyler say over the years. And then, but the more, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I saw Gary Neville talking about it once, and he was said, "Oh, I was trying to be too deliberate and not talking how you would speak about football." So I found myself doing that a bit and trying to be a bit too formal, a bit too clever. And I think in the first couple of weeks there were points where it sounds daft, but I actually forgot I was commentating. So I basically sat there for a good 10 seconds when I thought, "Oh, I better say something." But yeah, the more I've done it, I love doing it now. It's my favourite thing about Marine. The easiest game was we played Wrexham in the cup at home, and it's the only home game that I've commentated on, but because it was such a big game, and surprisingly, Marine have an overseas sort of following now because of the FA Cup run. So I always put on the live stream sort of chat. They would say, "Oh, let me know where you're listening from," or pop a comment in the comment section, and suddenly you've got Chinese characters coming up, Russian coming up, and hello from Milan, and I couldn't believe it. But yeah, that was a fun one to commentate on, because I actually recognised some of the players, like Paul Mullin was playing that day, and a few other big Wrexham players.
Yeah. And how do you find the pre and post match interviews then? Because I imagine sometimes they can be quite difficult if you've had a bit of a tonking.
Luckily, at the times where we've taken a bit of tonking this season, there was one on Boxing Day at home to Bootle in front of a sellout crowd. It's a bit of a local derby as well. Got beat 3-0. Luckily, that was on Boxing Day, so I wasn't there for that one. I was back home over Christmas. But yeah, for some of them, it's harder. It's obviously harder after a loss or a disappointing draw, for example. But luckily, the manager is really good with us. He doesn't he gives us good answers, and he talks a lot. I've noticed sometimes when I've interviewed players before when they've signed and they've not been as keen to be interviewed, and you're just not as comfortable, which is fair enough because a lot of people aren't comfortable being interviewed. But with the manager, he's really good with us, really, and obviously it's easier after a win, but yeah, you sort of have to push through it, really.
Are there sometimes questions that you'd really like to ask that you think, "Oh, I bet that probably shouldn't"? Or do you get free rein?
Yeah, definitely. It's for ones where I don't know. Sometimes when you watch a match and you think, "Oh, why's the manager done that?" Or I would have done this, but then you sort of think, "Well, I'm not the manager. I haven't done any coaching badges. I'm not gonna start questioning the manager, obviously, because I don't want him to start being cold with me." So it's just about how you phrase things, really. It's just sort of, "Oh, what did you think of so and so?" Or rather than why did you make that decision? Or they're the sort of things that I wouldn't ask, really. I wouldn't start questioning decisions, but everything else, it's just sort of a free game, really.
Yeah. So how is it then with the rest? So with the rest of the students on your course, then do you all, when you get to kind of third year, I suppose you start to get an idea of what part of media you'd like to go in, don't you? So how have you found it with everyone else? Does everyone start, "Well, I want to be a commentator now. I prefer to do social media stuff. Whatever."
I think, to be honest, with the way our course has gone, because our course has always been big on giving us a bit of everything and trying to make everyone really sort of well-rounded. I don't think, as far as I know anyway, I don't think anyone's really set on, "Oh, I want to be a broadcast." That's the main one, a broadcast or sort of newsy type of reporting. The people that know that they want to go into TV and radio sort of know. The people that want to try a bit of everything, such as myself, you sort of, I don't know, sort of trying to keep all your options open, really. But to be honest, I'm at this stage, I'm not closing any doors. I don't want to say I want to go into radio, I want to be a commentator, I want to work for a newspaper, because I just don't know, really. I want to try it all, see what sticks.
Like a lot of non-league clubs, quite high up non-league clubs, and probably a lot of football league clubs as well. They take a lot of students, don't they? It's an odd, isn't it? Because it's such a huge part of a club.
Yeah, well, I suppose that especially at non-league clubs, I mean, it's not like I do everything. It's not all the responsibilities on me. That there's a head of media who sort of oversees everything. But we are given pretty much free rein to write match reports how we want, interview how we want, and the commentary was something that the previous media officer, he did it a couple of times during the FA Cup run. Because obviously there was no fans in the stadium as well, so it sort of was born out of that. And I basically just said that I'd carry it on. But yeah, I don't know. I think with football clubs, they're happy to give experience. They're happy to help, from my experience anyway.
Yeah.
I've done a few bits for Everton as well this season for their women's team and for their under-23s. And again, that was because they contacted the uni and basically said, have you got any students that you think would be up for it? So yeah, it is surprising, but it's good, I think.
And you still get time to just watch football socially, because obviously a lot of your work takes place at the same time as all the other matches are on, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, that's the one downfall. I've hardly been to a Chesterfield game this season, to be completely honest, because obviously they're on at the same time as Marine, and I'm 60 miles away. Yeah, the early kickoff. If we're going to an away game, we'll watch the early kickoff on the bus, or the tea time game when you're coming back, because I travel with the team to the away matches, so it'll just be on the TV on the bus or whatever. And then Sundays. But yeah, it's pretty much just been Marine this season. I've watched Marine more than anyone else, and couldn't really tell you much about anyone else at the minute. I don't know. I think if I was to interview more Chesterfield players, I'd be a little bit starstruck at first, because you do sort of idolise them to a degree. I think it was a little bit easier starting at Marine because I didn't really know a lot about the club, so I just sort of my first experiences with them was just reporting on them and then interviewing a couple of them and just that sort of thing, and just sort of being around them. Really, it's just a bit more sort of normal. But if I don't know, if I was to talk to Drew Talbot or whoever, it would be a bit more like, oh, you're my favourite player growing up, and now I'm talking to you.
Yeah, that was a lovely guy, Drew. And the only player I found intimidating, and not in a bad way, was Nicky Law, because he's still really like intense, and you get this like. But I remember when David Reeves agreed to come on, who I really loved growing up. When he came on the screen, I was a bit like, it's David Reeves. It is a bit. And when Paul Cook rang me up, the whole story of how the Paul Cook thing happened was that I got a premium LinkedIn account, which is like 50 quid a month. It's quite expensive for LinkedIn premium, but on there you can then find anyone that has got a LinkedIn. And I found Paul Cook was on there on LinkedIn, but he was still, I think he's still like Portsmouth manager on LinkedIn. He's not updated it forever. So I thought, he's probably not using it. So I just sent a private message on, and then I was sat on the sofa one day and my phone rang and I picked it up and he went, "Oh, it's Paul Cook," like that. And I was like, I'm sorry, who? And he went, "It's Paul Cook." And I was like, "Oh, crikey." And he was just like, "Yeah, of course I'll go on the podcast." And I was like, "Okay."
Good result, that.
I was like, after he said that, I just went to my wife like, "How is Paul Cook on the phone?" And even my wife, who was not a Chesterfield fan really in the slightest, was a bit like, "Paul, what, the Paul Cook?" So it is weird when you get those people that ring you up. Anyway, speaking as we're talking about, I'm sorry, go for it. You were saying something.
I was going to say, when I was doing my podcast during the first lockdown, I managed to get an interview with Tommy Lee, and even then, for me, that was a big one. And when you're in the Zoom call and it says Tommy Lee is in the waiting room, I was like, here he is. I was almost sort of a bit nervous to press to let him in, but yeah, it's weird, isn't it, when you feel a little bit starstruck?
Yeah, it is. But it's funny, you've got a lot of those players that are really like Tommy Lee and Drew Talbot and Sam Morsey and people like that, they're like quite quickly replying. They're like, yeah, of course I will. You know, it's feels like there's a lot of footballers that, especially ones that have played quite a lot of games for Chesterfield, feel like they have a bit of a duty. I don't know if they really enjoy doing it. I'm sure some of them really do, but I think some of them feel like, oh yeah, of course it's my duty to like give up some time and do it, which is completely lovely.
It is, yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting when they're like Tommy Lee and Drew Talbot and that, they were so upfront about injuries and stuff like that you just think, wow, it's yes, some people, as soon as they're like 20 minutes in, start to open up about things that have happened in the career. And you're like, wow, it's actually not as an amazing career as you think it could be when you're growing up and you're like, I want to be a footballer. Anyway, so shall we go on to Chesterfield? So you are on the podcast because you are a Chesterfield fan. So are you born and bred Chesterfield?
I am, yeah.
So I don't ask how old you are, but when is your era? When is your Chesterfield era kind of growing?
Well, I to be honest, I only really started watching Chesterfield when I was about 9 or 10 years old, which for some people seems a bit late, but it's just when it was. Yeah, I went to a few games at Saltergate here and there, but my first when I first started like really watching Chesterfield and being into it was the first season at the new ground. So I mentioned him a minute ago, but my favourite players at the time were like players like Drew Talbot and obviously Jack Lester, Craig Davis, and Danny Whitaker, Tommy Lee, obviously those sorts of players. And pretty much ever since, just been obsessed, like most people are when they first get into a club.
Yeah.
So about 2010 was when we moved into the new stadium, weren't it? So it was about 12 years now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a great season to become fully invested in it. Like you had a whole Just Bounce thing happening, and you obviously had the rise in attendances and spanking new ground and stuff like that.
And we won the league that season. one of the main things that sticks with me is when obviously we were pretty much winning most games that year, had a brilliant season, won the league. I just remember my dad saying to me at the time, "Oh, don't get used to this. This isn't what being a Chesterfield fan is. There'll be a lot more ups and downs." And unfortunately, he was right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're a good fan base, really, in tempering our excitement. Because you do find that one good season comes along and then you'll have another 10 mediocre to bad ones. But I suppose that's how it goes. So what were your kind of standout games then? Because there's always those ones that people pick out from that season. There's like Rotherham and the Crew 5-5 and stuff like that.
The first game I remember was Cheltenham at home. I think we won 3-0. Talbot scored the first goal and Davis scored the second and the third. And that's sort of when Talbot sort of became my favourite player, because it was the first goal that I really remember seeing. And then, I'm lucky it was Talbot and not someone that left after a couple of years or something. But yeah, like you say, the Crew game, the Rotherham game, even the Bury game at home, but for a different reason, because I think we lost, was it 2-1 or 3-2? I think we lost 3-2. And, we were sort of going with Bury for the title. And that game, we'd already got promoted, but it was sort of, you want the title, don't you, when you're in that position? Yeah. And I just remember losing that game and just being a bit deflated when we left. And obviously went on to win the title anyway. But those are the games that really stand out for me that season.
Chesterfield were still unbeaten in the league but had dropped out of the top 3. If they wanted to prove their promotion credentials, then Drew Talbot's opener did just that. But 3 minutes into the second half came the second goal. More positive running from Talbot, the unintentional tee-up from Morgan, and an emphatic finish from Davis. The points were safe soon after. Morgan's quickly taken free kick into Davis, and the third matched the game's first for quality.
And how does that, because then obviously you experienced Paul Cook title winning season. What was it, like 3 years later or something? So how would you compare the two?
I think the Paul Cook season was. I always think of that as my favourite season, because I think, that it went on such a good run, and we played such good football that season. When you look at the players that we had in that year, it's ridiculous to think that we're in League Two with some of the players that we had. Sam Morsey. I know we've mentioned him a few times already, but Sam Morsey, Tommy Lee, Evo and Cooper and Hurd, then Gary Roberts, obviously, and players like that. I think that was probably that, and the season after, when we got the playoffs in League One. I think there's just the football that we saw over those couple of years was just unmatched. In the Sheridan title win, it was different, but not worse or better, but just different in terms of, I think, well, the strikers were more prolific in that year for a start. I think Davis did he win the Golden Boot with about 25, 26 goals? Jack Lester chipped in with about 15 or 16. Dean Smalley as well chipped in with a few. So, but I always, when you compare that to the Paul Cook team, maybe we didn't have a really prolific striker that season. I think Doyle got about 11 or 12 in the league. And Gary Roberts was chipping in with quite a few as well. So the goals were a bit more spread out, but I think the football overall was probably more enjoyable, more entertaining than the Cookie.
Which team would win in a versus Sheridan versus Cook team? I've thought about this a fair bit, and that's why I ended up doing that pack of top trumps ages ago, because I was just like, which team is better? Because I always found that, kind of looking back, I think that the Sheridan team in isolation was probably the most exciting season I've seen, but the Cook team was probably the best footballing team. So in a head-to-head, who would win?
I think I would go Cook, because I think, I don't know, just thinking about the defence, I think Richie Humphrey is one of the unsung heroes of that season. I think he was an experienced head in that team, did a great job at left back, and then the midfield. I think that team would slightly win the midfield battle over, it was Allett and Whittaker. Again, not a bad midfield by any stretch, but I just think Morsey and Ryan I think it would come down to the midfield, and I think Cook's team would win. Yeah.
Tough though, because you've got that strike force.
I know.
Leicester, they put goals past any team. It's tough to. It probably end 0-0 because Tommy Lee's in net for both teams. So you ended up doing a little while back, wasn't it? You did the post Saltergate 11 vote on Twitter, of which when I saw that you started doing it, I was like, oh, getting yourself in a whole heap of trouble here.
I know.
So what did the team end up as? Can you remember?
Yes, because I've started writing the piece for it today. So obviously Tommy Lee in goal. As soon as I put that one out, I thought I've got to put four options, but obviously there's only going to be one winner. I think he ended up with about 95% of the votes. So it was Tommy Lee, Drew Talbot, Everett and Cooper at centre back, Dan Jones, who's at right mid, Jay O'Shea, which was a bit of a edgy one because he wasn't always a right midfielder, but I didn't know where else to put him, and I ran out of other right midfielders, to be honest. Centre mid was Morsey and Ryan, left mid Roberts, then Shimanga and Leicester up top.
So it was quite. So Shimanga beat Doyle.
Yep,
it's interesting.
I know. To be fair, I think that was a tough one. I think the names, I can't remember which four I put together. I might have put Leicester and Doyle in the same one. But I think Kabongo beat Craig Davis, which was obviously, I thought he'd win, to be honest. I think he's the best natural striker that I've seen at Chesterfield. Dean Smalley was in there as well. And I can't remember whether Lee Novak got a shout. He's one of my favourite loan players, which is always dangerous because you never want to love a loan player because you're never not going to stay.
Love a loan player. Sammy Clingan, Jamal Campbell-Rice,
Daniel Johnson,
Jamie O'Hara,
Sid Nelson,
Martin Fulop. Had some good loan players over the years.
Yeah, I was looking at the Johnson's Pate Trophy the final team that we played at Wembley, and Frank Musa was in midfield, and it just sparked a little memory of how good he was when he was on loan. But I don't think he played that many games for us, but he was a good player. So, but yeah, I was surprised with a couple of the choices, to be honest. I thought that Sam Clucas might have edged it at left mid. I thought Tendai might have edged it at right mid. Tendai and Talbot was a bit of a weird one because obviously they could both really qualify for right back and right midfield.
Yeah.
So I always said, as I was doing it, that whoever didn't win at right back was going to be put in at right midfield as well. So I sort of expected them both to be in the team. But then Jay O'Shea won and it all went out the window, really.
Yeah, it's interesting because even in a decade or two where success was, a really huge success, but kind of felt at a minimum, certainly like last decade. It's interesting. You can still end up with a good solid 20 players that are right up there as some of the best players that people will have seen.
Yeah, well, I think we touched on it a little bit, but when I first started sort of getting into Chesterfield, I think it's one of the most successful periods in the club's history. 2 league titles, Johnson's Pate Trophy win, lost another final, League One playoffs. Picked a good time really, and then so obviously naturally there's going to be some good players in there, and I think Tommy Lee was around for about 9 years and played over 300 games. Players like Drew Talbot, I know he had his injuries, but he was brilliant there for 7 or 8 years, I think. And Jack Lester speaks for himself, 6 or 7 years at Chesterfield, and then look at some of the players that maybe didn't spend a long time at Chesterfield, but they've gone on to the Premier League, like Liam Cooper, Sam Clucas. So yeah, there's been some good players over the last 10 years. It's been good, really.
Danny Jones on that left foot, lays it off to Morsey. In for Roberts, the little flick over the top of Clucas! And Sam Clucas gives Chesterfield the equaliser. It was a well-worked goal in the end by the Spyrites. Sam Clucas gets his second goal of the season.
And going on to current Chesterfield team then. So if you were to do your poll again in 10 years' time, which players in the current Chesterfield team do you think would be options in a Twitter poll?
I think I did put Lawrence Maguire in there because I did try for a lot of the positions. I did try and include a current one. I think I put Alex Whittle in there as well. He's probably the player of the season from what I've heard and from what I've seen. I like Jeff King. I think he may over Talbot. I don't know. Probably not over Talbot, but he deserves a mention. Obviously, Kabongo has already made the team. But he could, if he's here next season and he can keep scoring goals when he's back from injury, then I'm sure he'll just solidify his place in the team. I really like Jack Clark as well. When he's it's easy to sort of forget because I don't think he's played since December. But he's a tricky player. I think he did really well when he first came in, especially, and scored a few goals when he was on loan. Been in and out of the team, but I think he could be in with a shout. And
if Chesterfield do go on to have a successful end to the season, will you get to see some of it? Because I assume some of the league a bit further down from Chesterfield is ending relatively soon, isn't it?
Yep. Marine have got 3 more, at least 4 more games because we're in the playoffs, probably not going to win the league. There's 3 more normal league games to play. Then if they get to the playoff final, that's on the 30th of April. I'm booked in for Torquay on the 7th. And then, I'll try and get some more games after that. I can't remember the fixtures off the top of my head, but I'm booked in for Torquay. That's my next game as far as I know.
So as we get into end of season, and you'll obviously be ending a course, ending your degree soon. So what's the plan?
Well, I suppose I'm in the process of applying for jobs and handing my CV to anyone that will take it, and seeing what comes up. And I think I'm staying in Liverpool for at least another year. Just sort of more opportunities are really close to Manchester and Liverpool. Two big cities in terms of covering football. And then after that, don't know. Might come back to Chesterfield. Might try another city, or I don't know, to be honest. But just for the short term future, I know I'm staying in Liverpool and just handing my CV and trying to get as much maybe freelance work as much as I can. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's obviously a competitive industry, isn't it? But it's one that you want to get into, isn't it? When you've had that taste of it, I suppose it's one that you want to stay in.
Well, my reasoning behind it was always the best job in the world is being a footballer. The second best job in the world is watching football and talking about it. So as far as I'm concerned, I've been into this really since I was about 14 or 15. I did my work experience in year 10 in the media office at Chesterfield. So it's sort of always been what I've had my eyes on, what I've wanted to do, and I couldn't really think about doing anything else at the minute.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for coming on. So which player should we end with a clip on? I guess it's Drew Talbot, is it?
It's Drew Talbot. It's got to be.
I'll end with some Drew Talbot.
His goal against Cheltenham in 2010-11, if you can find it.
Chesterfield was still unbeaten in the league but had dropped out of the top three. If they wanted to prove their promotion credentials, then Drew Talbot's opener did just that.